Turn in your Bible to Joel chapter 2. We started a series on Sunday night called The Great Escape. And as I began looking through the Bible with the word escape, I found some surprises in there. And we're going to talk about one of those tonight. This is part 2 of the series, and the title is The Landing Place. We can also say The Standing Place. The landing, standing place. All right, but Joel chapter 2, you know verse 32. It says, "And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, among the remnant whom the Lord calls." Now, one of the things that verse is telling us there in Joel 2:32, of course, you know, it's all through the New Testament that whoever calls on the name of the Lord, and the name of the Lord is Jesus, whoever calls on Jesus in truth, out of a true heart, can be assured of salvation. But there's something else that's being said here in verse 32. There's a difference there between, and we know this, there's salvation, there's like basic born-again salvation, and then there's full salvation. Like it says in Hebrews 9:28, that for those who look for Him will be in line to receive full salvation. That doesn't mean that those who don't receive full salvation go to hell, but it does mean that salvation is more than just having a get-out-of-hell-free card, right? That there's salvation that involves, well, as it says here, deliverance for the remnant. See, and that's who God wants those 144,000 to attain to that place. And even for the woman in the wilderness to attain to that place. And for as many as can at any time be the remnant. And a remnant, of course, means that you are, well, like a carpet remnant is something that's been left over from another project and thrown away, basically. Well, the remnant is those that are not part of Babylon, that have come out from among her and not participated in her sins and her plagues, right? Well, let's talk about that right there, about being the remnant and how important that is. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. See, just being saved, getting born again doesn't necessarily exempt a person from suffering things that are going to happen in this world. See, Lord, how do I say this? And I know that all of y'all that I'm speaking to here know this, but there may be some people that will see this on the internet that don't know this. Just getting born again is not all there is. Yeah, that's all you need to go to heaven. But if you think that just because you prayed a prayer and asked Jesus to come into your heart, that automatically qualifies you to be raptured out of here before the Antichrist shows up on planet Earth, or before the judgments that the book of Revelation talks about, you're mistaken. Steve Jordan talks about this every Friday night now for years and makes that case very well. So I'm not going to try to take time out from this message to try to make the case again. But, you know, I realize how that thinking right there being so prevalent in the church, and the idea that God is in control of everything, that when Christians think that way, then they will totally not be interested in anything about end times, because it's like, well, God's got it all under control. He's operating the switch. It's His doing, and because I prayed a prayer, I belong to Him, so none of that's going to happen to me. Well, so what do you think they'll do if some of that stuff is starting to happen to them, which it is now? We have entered into that. Now, we're in it. You know, some people, well, God's going to get me out of here before it gets bad. Well, what is your definition of bad? You know, I mean, with the whole world under the control of the World Health Organization, we're seeing the new world order. We're seeing one world government emerging right now, today, on April the 1st. And this is no fool, okay? This is not fooling you. This is the truth. Okay, so, you know, I suggest, number one, that you come to realize that there's more to this being a Christian than just asking Jesus to come into your heart and get saved. There's more to it than that. Yeah, if that's all you've got, then that's better than the alternative by far. But that's not all there is. And number two, that I say this over and over, and you know, sometime I probably ought to just do a sermon about this right here. God gave you free will. God is not going to make your decisions for you. You have to make your own decisions about whether you're going to accept Jesus or not, whether you're going to walk with Him, whether you're going to obey His Word. And when you don't, there are consequences. And it's not God doing it to you. Okay? So, here's that. I said all that because this is kind of what 1 Corinthians 10 is talking about. Go down to verse 11. It says, now these things befell them, and what he's talking about is the judgments that came upon the Israelites after they left Egypt. See, so we could say, in a way, that's a type and shadow of what would happen to a Christian after they come out of the world and get born again. But if that's all they do, and they don't overcome some of these other things that come along, then bad stuff happens. Just like, and it goes through here and lists these things that befell them. It says, these things befell them by way of a figure. And in the Amplified it says, as an example and warning to us. They were written to admonish and fit us. Now, who is us? It's the body of Christ. Well, specifically, it was the church at Corinth. But if it's the church at anywhere, this is written to Christians. This is written to the body of Christ. It's written to you and me. It's to admonish and fit us. Not some other Christian somewhere else, but you and me. All of us, for right action by good instruction, we in whose days the ages have reached their climax. Boy, I mean, is it not closer now than it was when these words were written? Okay, well, what are these things? Well, in the previous verses, there's 6 things listed, or that's how I read it anyway. First of all, in verse 5, it says, God was displeased with the majority of them, and they were overthrown and strewn along the ground in the wilderness. Well, the book of Hebrews tells us why that happened. Keep the place here. Go to Hebrews chapter 3. So, one of the things that happened to them is explained here. Hebrews 3, verse 17. It says, and with whom was God irritated and provoked and grieved for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose dismembered bodies were strewn and left in the desert? And to whom did he swear that they should not enter into his rest, but those who disobeyed, that is, who had not listened to his word and refused to be compliant or persuaded? So we see that they were not able to enter in because of their unwillingness. Unbelief had shut them out. So one of these things that we're warned against is unbelief. Now keep the place in Hebrews. We'll come back here in a minute. But go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. The second thing is in verse 6. It says, "These things are examples and warnings for us not to desire or crave or covet or lust after evil and carnal things as they did." Satisfying the flesh. Just living for the flesh, living for self. In verse 7, the third thing here is, "Do not be worshipers of false gods, as some of them were. As it was written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and they offered sacrifices to the golden calf. And they rose up to sport and to dance and give way to jesting and hilarity." Well, see, a lot of things that people do that give them a lot of hilarity and give them a good time are actually things that are done in honor of false gods. So idolatry, we could say, is a third thing that he's warning us against. And fourth thing, in verse 8, he says, "And we must not gratify evil desire in lust, in immorality, as some of them did." And 23,000 all fell in a single day. Now he's talking there about sexual sin when the Israelites committed fornication with the Moabites. And this was what Balaam, told the Midianites, if they would just lure the Israelites into that, then God would destroy them. Okay? And the fifth thing is in verse 9. It says, "We should not tempt the Lord." Now, this is always something, I've heard that terminology all my life. And I've heard that term misused, actually. I remember the first time I ever heard it, when I was real little, I heard people saying that praying for God to heal somebody was tempting him. No, that is not what tempting God is. Now, I think the Amplified says it pretty well. It's trying his patience, critically appraising him, or exploiting his goodness. Well, here's the best example out of the Scriptures. Keep the place here in 1 Corinthians 10, and let's go to Matthew chapter 4. I mean, if Jesus himself will define what tempting God is, I think we can take that one to the bank. Matthew chapter 4, verse 6. Let's start verse 5. The devil, this is Jesus getting tempted in the wilderness. "The devil took him into the holy city." He levitated him, I guess, transported him, and set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said, "Well, if you are the Son of God, then throw yourself down. For it is written, God will give his angels charge over you, and in their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone." Well, now, if somebody actually did something like this, if somebody actually did something foolhardy, I'm not talking about something that is contrary to normal sense and reason. I'm talking about something that is just downright stupid, and then they try to claim some scripture, like snake handlers, okay? They do that. They take that verse, Mark 16:17, says, well, these signs will follow them that believe. They'll lay hands on the sick and they'll recover. And they'll pick up serpents and it'll not harm them. They say, well, see, it says right there in the Bible I'm supposed to pick up the snake. So here, I'm picking it up and waving it around, right? Well, that is tempting God. But you know what? I think the way and Jesus said, it's written, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. In other words, he was telling Satan, what you're doing is you're tempting God here by putting me in this situation and telling me I ought to do that. Well, what would we call that? I'd call it presumption. Is you doing what you want to do and then trying to slap God's blessing on it or try to claim some scriptural justification for that. And it happens a lot. Okay? Back to 1 Corinthians. Keep the place in Matthew too. We'll have the place in Matthew and the place of Hebrews to keep. Verse 10 says, and we should not discontentedly complain, as some of them did, and they were put out of the way entirely by the destroyer. See, these 6 things are open doors to Satan. Simply put, in all of these cases, when these people did these things and they came under judgment, the enemy came to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And the enemy still is out there to steal, kill, and destroy. So that's why in 1 Corinthians, go back there, it says, verse 11, so these things befell them to admonish and fit us for right action. Verse 12, therefore, let anyone who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. So just because you think you're standing, there you might not be, in other words. So you've got to be careful about that. Well, how do we do that? Well, he's fixing to tell us. Verse 13, because he says, for no temptation, no trial, no enticement to sin, no matter how it comes or where it leads, has overtaken you and laid hold on you that's not common to man. That is, no temptation or trial has come upon you that's beyond human resistance, or that is such beyond your power to resist, to overcome it. It says, but God is faithful to His word and His compassionate nature, and He can be trusted not to let you be tempted and tried beyond your ability and strength of resistance and power to endure. But with the temptation, He will always also provide the way out, the means of escape to a landing place. Well, in the King James, it actually uses the word escape there. But the Amplified has accurately translated that word is not fuego, the one like the woman fuegos, escapes to the wilderness. This is not that word. This word is ekbasis, which the Amplified has accurately said means escape to a landing place or a standing place. See, up there in verse 12 it says, you want to be sure you're standing? Well, you need to be standing at the place God directs you to stand. And if you're standing there, you will be capable and strong and powerful to bear up under whatever the trial or circumstance is. Now, see, this is telling you a couple of things here. This, I guess, answers the question about God's sovereignty versus what is our free will and what is the devil allowed to do, and how does the devil get by with all of his stuff. It's like, okay, God ultimately is the referee. And if you will turn to Him, He will overrule what the devil wants to do to you. But if you don't turn to Him, don't expect God to do that. Or maybe I should say, if you have turned away from God, don't expect Him to keep the devil off of you. Or don't blame God when something bad happens. But the other thing it says is, if you do turn to God in the midst of a troublesome circumstance or situation, He will make this way of escape. Now, I want to point out something else in verse 12 before we move on. What He tells us to do so that we will find that way of escape is to take heed. Well, go to Hebrews, keep the place here in 1 Corinthians, go to Hebrews chapter 11. We talked about this on Sunday. Hebrews 11 verse 7 in the Amplified talks about Noah. Well, now there was a situation where God provided a way to a landing place. The landing place was called Mount Ararat. And it was a long voyage to get there. But they got there. Well, how did that happen? Well, Noah heeded the Lord. I mean, from the time he got the word until the landing on Mount Ararat was 121 years. It was 120 years preparing the ark, and then another year plus some before he got off the ark after the flood waters receded. So heeding the Lord was a long, involved process. So if it's been a long, involved process in us arriving at spiritual maturity, well, it hadn't been 121 years for me yet, so I guess there's still hope, right? But here in Hebrews 11, verse 7, it says, prompted by faith, Noah, being forewarned by God concerning events of which as yet there was no visible sign, he took heed and diligently and reverently constructed and prepared an ark for the deliverance of his own family. And by this he passed judgment and sentence on the world's unbelief and became an heir and possessor of righteousness. See, so taking heed to God is counted as righteousness. Just like Abraham, when God told Abraham to, leave where you leave Ur of the Chaldees and go to a place that I will show you, and so Abraham did, and God counted that as righteousness. So when we heed what God says, that's righteous. Anyway, back to 1 Corinthians. Now, you can keep the place in Hebrews. We'll be back there. But in verse 13, it says that he will make a way of escape to a landing place. And I told you that word is not fuego. That doesn't mean to flee. It's number 1545 in Strong's Concordance. And this is interesting because there's only two places in the New Testament where that word is used. And here in this place, the King James translates it escape. Now, the Amplified accurately says it means to escape to a landing place. Well, there's a good reason for that. Because the word ekbasis is a compound word in Greek. Ek means from or out of, and basis, kind of like the English word, a basis. What is the basis of something? It's the foundation of it. It's what it's resting upon. This rostrum that I'm using here, there's a wood platform that this is sitting on so it can bring it up high enough for me to, read my notes. Well, that's the basis of this rostrum. Okay, that's what it's resting upon. So the ekbasis is what our faith is resting upon, and that is a way of escape. But see, it's not just, okay, there's the door, there's the exit sign, I'm going to head for the exit sign. Well, okay, that's fuego, or that's fugo. That's a different word. The other place in the New Testament where this word 1545, ekbasis, is used, has a totally different translation in the King James English Version. It's Hebrews chapter 13, but I want you to see the meaning here. Hebrews 13, verse 7. Doesn't seem to be talking about escape from anything at all here. It says, I'm reading this in the Amplified, it says, remember your leaders and superiors in authority, in the church, see, of course. For it was they who brought to you the word of God. Observe attentively and consider their manner of living. That's the way ekbasis is translated there. It's a manner of living. The outcome, that's a good translation, the outcome. So the escape is an outcome. It's when you finally get there. I remember my cousin Jim graduated from Samuels High School in Dallas. I think it was in 1967 or 68. And somebody right before him graduated, and one of his friends or relatives out in the audience said, "Finally made it, Joe." Well, that was the outcome of his high school career, right? Well, we're talking about the outcome of a Christian life. And they're saying that the leaders that should be followed are the ones who have an outcome of a well-spent life. Then imitate their faith. But see, that's their ekbasis. That's the outcome. There's another verse in the Old Testament that speaks of outcome. Now, in the Old Testament, of course, it's not Greek, it's Hebrew. You can let the book of Hebrews go, but let's go to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29. You see, this has everything to do with what's facing us right now. Because we're facing serious times that are sure to get worse before they get better. And I don't mean in a matter of weeks or months. I mean, it'll be years at the minimum. But here in Jeremiah 29, we've got some encouraging words. Let me read this for you in the Amplified, Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And this is God talking. He says, I know the thoughts and plans that I have for you, says the Lord. Thoughts and plans for welfare and peace and not for evil, to give you hope in your final outcome, in your escape, in your ekbasis, in your landing place, or in your standing place, wherever you find yourself. Verse 12, and then you will call upon me, you will come and pray to me, and I will hear and heed you. You will seek me, inquire for, and require me as a vital necessity. That's what we've got to do. Not just a casual, not just a one-time pray a prayer at the front of a church, but this being an all-the-time thing. It says, you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, says the Lord, and I will release you from captivity and gather you from all the nations and the places from which I have driven you, says the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I caused you to be carried captive. In other words, before the devil started whatever his deal was that he's been doing to us, God's going to undo everything the devil has done. God does stuff like that. You know, nothing's too difficult for him. But it's a place that we've got to seek, it says. And it's a place in God. It's a spiritual state of being. It's not really, you know, this is why I say it's not an exit to a geographical place. Like Fugo could and probably is an actual, you're getting out of town, you're getting out of Dodge, you're going somewhere where they can't find you. And I don't know, you know, that may be a spiritual thing too. But this is something else. This is something in our hearts. Go back to Matthew chapter 7. Here's the way Jesus describes it. Matthew 7, verse 24 says, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them. See, that's that heed thing again. Whoever hears the sayings of Jesus and does them, Jesus says, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rains descended, the flood came. The wind blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall because it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, the flood came, the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Well, see, standing is an ongoing thing. You know, so ek basis, to have a basis to stand on, is a state of being. It's an ongoing condition that God would like us to remain in. And we can. I mean, He's provided it for us. Let me give you a couple of examples of that. And let me say, it's not based on our goodness. And it's not based on good works. And it's not based on necessarily how far along you are with God. You know, we're all at different places with God. I mean, you would say, well, I'm born again. I've been born again for 40 whatever years. Or I'm Spirit-filled. Or I've been through deliverance. Or I used to have this spirit that would make me drink or make me do that. And I don't have that anymore. I've been delivered. Well, praise God. Okay. But we still, all of us have what it speaks of in Hebrews 12 as that sin which so easily besets us. And, you know, we all have our personality quirks that we, you know, developed over a whole lifetime and so forth. And a lot of these things are rather ornery and don't seem to want to go away. Well, that doesn't have to prevent us being able to stand. And I'll show it to you. Romans chapter 14. In verse 4, it admonishes us not to be critical of someone else because of the problems or the seeming lack of spiritual maturity that they are showing. Right? Here in Romans 14, verse 4. And see, we can turn this around and apply it to ourselves, is the reason I'm bringing this up here. Right? Who are you to pass judgment on or censure another's household servant? It's before his own master that he stands or falls, and he shall stand and be upheld, for the master, the Lord, is mighty to support him and make him stand. Right? So God can make us stand if we will just listen to Him and believe what He says. And in Romans chapter 5, it describes that very thing that I just described there, about Him giving us the ability to stand. That, folks, is the best definition I can come up with God's grace. Because here in Romans chapter 5, let me read this. Romans 5 verse 1. Therefore, since we are justified, declared righteous, and given right standing with God through faith, it's through believing Him, let us grasp the fact that we have the peace of reconciliation to enjoy, peace with God, through our Lord Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One. Through Him also we have access and entrance and introduction by faith into grace, which is God's favor, in which we firmly and safely stand. So the thing that enables us to stand, the thing that enables us to find a landing place when we're in the midst of trials, is God's grace, simply put. Now, this is here an interesting thing. It says we have access, or we have an introduction. You know, Jesus said that, you can't get to God except through me. So that means Jesus introduces us to God the Father. And in Hebrews 10, I think it talks about His blood makes the way for us into the Holy of Holies. That Jesus had to come and be the sacrifice for our sins so we could even go before God. And, I've heard these truths all my life, because I was raised in church. And I had believing parents. And heard some pretty good preaching when I was a little one. But all the time I always kind of wondered, okay, yeah, I accept that as theologically true. And, when it came to a point in my life where I really recognized I was a sinner and I needed God to save me, I cried out on that basis. And I cried out to Jesus. I didn't go to Mohammed or Buddha or somebody else. So I know it to be true. But it's like, What does this mean that we have access to God through the sacrifice of Jesus? Well, think about it this way. This is just an analogy, okay? This is just a Ray Andrews analogy for you. There are certain things on the internet that you have to subscribe to in order to get that content. That you have to click on the boxes and say, I agree to the terms and conditions of this website in order to, or you know, you're going to make a purchase for something. See, a lot of things, a lot of commerce now is having to be done on the internet because businesses are not letting people come in person to do stuff. So you're going to have to do a lot of things on the internet. And when you click on those boxes, it's like you're entering in to them. Your faith is where you subscribe to God's plan for your life. That's what your faith is. It's an introduction. It's an access. It's a subscription to God and everything that He is and everything that He has. And with that subscription, you get communication. You can talk to Him and you can receive communication from Him to you through His Spirit. And you know, without His Spirit, this book is thousands of pages of rhetoric. But when you subscribe to Him, it's the Word of life. Go to Proverbs chapter 4. Verse 10, in the Amplified, it says, Hear, my son, my daughter. God's not a respecter of persons. Hear and receive my sayings, and the years of your life shall be many. How about that? God's promising you long life. He says, I've taught you in the way of skillful and godly wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your steps shall not be hampered. Your path will be open and clear. And when you run, you shall not stumble. Boy, that's something I like when I'm trail running, is a promise that I'm not going to stumble. Well, we're fixing to be the trail run of trail runs here on planet Earth. And He says, will not stumble. But verse 13 tells us how we got to do this. We got to take firm hold of instruction. You know, not just let it go in one ear and out the other, or just kind of have it going while the TV's playing the soap opera or whatever, you know, or dancing with the voice or whatever it is, you know. You need to really grab hold of this thing and not let it go, and guard instruction, for it's your life. Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Do not go in it. Turn from it and pass on. See, this is the way of escape is what we're escaping from, see. It says, for they cannot sleep unless they've caused trouble and vexation. I'm not going to go all into this. I think Steve has done some of this on Friday nights recently, and he may have some more to say about this. But whatever the nature of this disease that they're calling COVID-19 is, whatever it is, wherever it came from, whether it's natural or man-made, and where it was first made or where it was released and how it got loose in the world, whatever it is, it has kicked in an agenda that the global elite have planned for a long time. That they are using this to bring about control of the population of planet Earth, to bring forth this whole thing that the Antichrist is going to take charge of someday soon. And it's like, do these people just stay up at night to dream how they're going to do this? I mean, this is brilliant. You know, I'm not praising Satan. I mean, I'm criticizing Satan. But I mean, this is just so evil. And that's what he's talking about here. He says, they cannot sleep unless they've caused trouble or vexation. Their sleep is taken away from them unless they've caused someone to fall, to fail. For they eat the bread of wickedness, and they drink the wine of violence. But the path of the just and righteous is like the light of dawn that shines more and more, brighter and clearer, until it reaches the full strength and glory in the perfect day. See, God intends to glorify us. You know, it says that in the 8th chapter of Romans. That's the end. That's the final outcome, is us being glorified, to be like Jesus. But the way of the wicked is like deep darkness, and they do not even know over what they're stumbling. Wow. Well, let me end with this. Isaiah chapter 55. You know, I think it was Charles Dickens in the novel, The Tale of Two Cities, that the first line is, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Well, if there ever was a time that those words applied to, I think it's now. And we ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, the trouble that planet Earth can be in, we know what's coming. The book of Revelations tells you, the Olivet Discourse, which is Jesus talking to his disciples, which is found in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, it tells you. The book of Daniel tells you. Many of the prophets tell us what's coming. And so, you know, it's unrighteous to just push all that away and say, oh, I don't want to know. I'm right with God, so that's all I care about. Well, that's unrighteous. That wasn't what Noah did. Noah heard the word, he received it, and he acted upon it. And that's what God's expecting us to do. And when we do, here's the final outcome. Here's the ekbasis. Here is the escape to the landing place. Isaiah 55, verse 11. It says, so shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing for which I sent it. For you shall go out with joy, and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills will break forth into singing before you, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And instead of the thorn, and remember, the thorn is the worries and the cares of this life. Instead of all of that, will come up the cypress tree. And a cypress tree, if here in Texas even, you go to some place where there's a river or there's a pond or a marsh or something, and you have these trees. I'm thinking there's a park in Austin called, what is the name of that? Ellen, what's that? The place where that had all the rocks where all the people were swimming? I don't know. It's really in the city of Austin, and it's actually a state park. Yeah. And there are all of these big cypress trees. They're like cedar trees, but they're huge. And they're just kind of just hovering over the water as it flows down off of this waterfall. It's like they're just soaking it up, and they're just enjoying it, you know. And it's like if we're a cypress tree, then we're not troubled by the water. We're not troubled by the flood. We're not troubled by the stuff that's going on. And instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree. Well, we've got myrtle trees sitting out here in our driveway, in the portico there. They're called crepe myrtles. And in the summertime in Texas, they get all different colors. Some are white, some are pink, some are purple, some are red. And the hotter it is, the more they like it. Right? And it shall be to the Lord for a name, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. You know, us overcoming, us being overcomers at this time, I think what God is saying here is for the next 1,000 years, they're going to be talking about what we're going through right now. Have you thought about that? That you're making history. So go make some history, folks. So, Father, thank you for the promises of your word, and thank you especially for the landing place, the standing place, the basis of our lives being set upon your word so that we can overcome. And it's